The Holonet feed goes live across the entire galaxy. Bail Organa stands at the podium. He's holding two babies. Every being in the Republic, now the Empire, is watching. He speaks directly into the camera. I am Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan. These children are Luke and Leia Skywalker. Their father was Anakin Skywalker. Their mother was Padme Amidala. Both parents are dead. I am adopting them. The galaxy will watch them grow. 30 seconds. That's all it takes to detonate a bomb that will reshape galactic history. Emperor Palpatine, watching from his throne, realizes he's been checkmated by a senator holding infants. Darth Vader, hunting Jedi in the Outer Rim, stops mid-strike when the news reaches him. His children are alive. Everyone knows. He believed them dead. Palpatine told him he killed them. That lie just shattered on every holoscreen in the galaxy. This isn't hiding. This is the most dangerous gamble in Star Wars history. Bail Organa just made Anakin Skywalker's children the most famous beings alive before they can even walk. No secret identities, no moisture farms, no hidden princess. Just two babies publicly claimed, their bloodline announced to trillions, raised in the spotlight while their father serves the Empire in darkness. What if transparency was the weapon? What if making them impossible to kill quietly was the only way to keep them alive? What if Luke and Leia Skywalker grew up knowing the entire galaxy was watching them, knowing their father was Darth Vader, knowing every choice they made was a political statement about whether evil can be transcended or whether bloodlines doom you? Everything changes. Vader can't hunt children everyone adores. Palpatine can't murder babies the galaxy's watching. The rebellion gets instant symbols. And two kids grow up carrying the weight of being Darth Vader's children in Emperor Palpatine's galaxy, deciding whether to save their father or destroy him, all while billions watch their every move. One decision, one press conference, one moment of either political genius or catastrophic madness, and the entire original trilogy gets rewritten. Let's go back to Paulus Massa, right after Padme dies. Obi-Wan holds the twins. Bail stands nearby. Yoda watches. They're making the decision that will shape the galaxy's future. In the timeline, they decide on secrecy. Separate the twins, hide them on opposite ends of the galaxy. Never let anyone know they exist. But what if Bail Organa, senator from Alderaan, veteran of the Clone Wars and one of the shrewdest political minds in the galaxy, makes a different calculation? He looks at these babies and he thinks strategically. The Empire is hours old. Palpatine has just declared himself emperor. The Jedi are being hunted and slaughtered. The Republic is dead. Opposition is scattered and terrified. The new regime is built on lies. That the Jedi betrayed the Republic, that Palpatine saved everyone, that the Empire brings peace and security. But Bail knows the truth. He knows Palpatine orchestrated everything. He knows Anakin Skywalker fell to the dark side and became Darth Vader. He knows these children represent something powerful. What if he doesn't hide them? What if he does the opposite? Obi-Wan would immediately object. The Jedi Master's instinct is to protect through concealment. Hide the children, raise them in obscurity, keep them safe until they're old enough to challenge the Sith. It's cautious, it's traditional, it's what Jedi do. But Bail isn't a Jedi, he's a politician. And politicians understand that sometimes the most dangerous place is also the safest place. Sometimes being in the spotlight protects you better than being in the shadows. Bail's argument would be tactical and brilliant. If we hide these children and the Empire discovers them, they die quietly and no one knows. But if we make them public, if we make them beloved by the galaxy, if we make them symbols of hope and innocence, then killing them becomes politically catastrophic for Palpatine. The Emperor is still consolidating power. He still needs public support. He can't afford to be seen murdering babies, especially not the children of Anakin Skywalker, the hero of the Clone Wars who billions of beings admired. Think about it. Palpatine's entire propaganda machine is built on the lie that the Jedi betrayed the Republic. But Anakin Skywalker was the poster boy for the Republic during the Clone Wars. His face was on recruitment posters. His battles were Holonet events. People loved him. When Palpatine announces that Anakin died heroically fighting the Jedi's betrayal, the galaxy mourns. They see Anakin as a victim of the Jedi, not as a villain. His children would inherit that sympathy. Now imagine Bail Organa exploiting this. He takes Luke and Leia, and instead of hiding them, he holds a press conference. He stands before the galaxy and says, Anakin Skywalker, the hero you loved, had children. His wife, Senator Padme Amidala, died in childbirth. These innocent babies have lost both parents to the chaos of recent events. As Anakin's friend and colleague, I am adopting them. I will raise them on Alderaan, give them the love and security they deserve, and honor the memory of their heroic father. It's perfect political theater. It's emotional, it's sympathetic, it tugs at every heartstring, and it boxes Palpatine into a corner. The Emperor can't reveal that Anakin is actually Darth Vader without admitting he lied about Anakin's death. He can't kill the children without looking like a monster who murders babies. He can't kidnap them without proving he's the tyrant that Bail is subtly implying he is. Every move Palpatine might make to eliminate these children becomes a political disaster. Bail is essentially using the children as human shields, but shields made of public opinion rather than physical barriers. It's ruthless. It's calculating. It puts Luke and Leia in danger of a different kind than physical harm. But it might actually work. Yoda would be deeply conflicted about this plan. The ancient Jedi Master thinks in terms of the Force and destiny, not politics and public relations. He would worry that making the children public invites exactly the attention they're trying to avoid. But Bail would counter that attention is inevitable. These are Skywalker children. They're going to be powerful in the Force. Hiding them just delays discovery. Making them public on their own terms gives them control of the narrative. Obi-Wan's concerns would be more practical. What about their training? How do you teach Force-sensitive children to use their abilities when the entire galaxy is watching? How do you prepare them to fight the Empire when their every move is documented on the holonet? Bail's answer would be that you do it in plain sight, carefully, disguised as something else. Physical training can be framed as self-defense lessons for children who face threats because of who they are. Mental disciplines can be meditation and mindfulness, things wealthy families teach their children anyway. And when they're older, when war comes, their training will already be complete. The decision would be agonizing for everyone involved. They all want what's best for Luke and Leia, but they disagree fundamentally on what that means. Obi-Wan wants them safe. Yoda wants them prepared for their destiny. Bail wants them to be symbols that inspire resistance against the Empire. These goals aren't necessarily compatible, but in this timeline, Bail's political acumen wins the argument. He makes his case, and despite reservations, Obi-Wan and Yoda reluctantly agree to try it his way. So it happens. Bail Organa returns to Alderaan not with one secretly adopted daughter, but with publicly acknowledged twins. He announces it through every media channel. The holonet explodes with the story. Anakin Skywalker's children, orphaned by the Jedi's betrayal, rescued and adopted by Senator Organa. Images of Bail holding the babies flood every screen in the galaxy. Public reaction is overwhelmingly positive. People are moved by this act of compassion. They rally around these innocent children who represent everything that was lost in the Clone Wars. The political impact is immediate and massive. Systems that were uncertain about the Empire suddenly have something to point to as evidence of goodness still existing. Bail Organa, already respected as a senator and a decent man, becomes even more beloved. Alderaan's status as a world of peace and compassion is reinforced, and critically, any move against Alderaan or against these children becomes infinitely more complicated for Palpatine, because now the Emperor has a problem. He knows these are Vader's children. He knows they're potentially powerful Force users. He knows they represent a long-term threat, but he can't touch them without massive political fallout. The Empire is too new, too fragile, too dependent on public acquiescence. Palpatine has spent years carefully manipulating public opinion. Murdering beloved orphan babies would undo all of that instantly. So Palpatine is forced to play a longer game. He can't kill the children, but he can undermine them. He can use his propaganda machine to slowly turn public opinion. He can plant stories about the Organa family, about Alderaan, about the children themselves. He can prepare the ground so that when the time comes, when the children are older and less sympathetic, he can move against them without the public backlash he'd face now. And he has to manage Vader, because Darth Vader just learned that his children are alive, and the entire galaxy knows it before he does. Imagine that moment. Vader is on an Imperial Star Destroyer executing Palpatine's orders when someone mentions the news. Anakin Skywalker's children have been found. They're being raised by Bail Organa on Alderaan. Every screen is showing their faces. Vader's reaction would be seismic. The rage, the grief, the confusion, the desperate. Imperial intelligence would monitor them constantly. Every friend they make, every teacher they study with, every word they speak in public, all of it would be reported to Palpatine. The Emperor would be looking for weaknesses, for leverage, for opportunities. and he'd be patient. He's playing a game measured in decades, not months. He can wait for the right moment to move against them, but the rebellion would also be watching them for different reasons. Bail Organa is one of the founders of the Rebel Alliance in the canonical timeline, and he'd likely play a similar role here. But now he has Luke and Leia, public figures who could potentially be powerful symbols for the rebellion. Should he use them that way? Should he keep them out of it entirely? The debate within the nascent rebellion would be intense. Some rebel leaders would argue that Luke and Leia should be the face of the resistance. They're young, compelling, directly connected to the Clone Wars era that many beings are nostalgic for. They represent hope and the possibility of redemption. Putting them forward as symbols could rally systems to the rebel cause. Others would argue the opposite, that using children as propaganda is morally wrong and tactically stupid. It would make them targets and validate Imperial claims that the rebellion uses innocence as shields. Bail would be torn. As their adoptive father, he wants to protect them. As a rebel leader, he sees their potential value. As a politician, he understands that they're going to be used as symbols whether he wants it or not. So the question is whether he controls that narrative or lets others control it. His decision would likely be to let Luke and Leia choose for themselves when they're old enough, but to prepare them for either path. When Luke and Leia reach their mid to late teens, around 16 or 17, they'd start making their own political statements. Maybe Leia gives a speech at a youth summit about the need for democracy and accountability in government. Maybe Luke is caught on camera defending someone from Imperial stormtroopers during a crackdown on Alderaan. These moments would go viral across the holonet. The children of Darth Vader standing up for justice and freedom. The symbolism would be overwhelming and exactly what the rebellion needs, but it would also paint enormous targets on their backs. Palpatine could potentially tolerate them as long as they're passive, as long as they're just symbolic orphans living quiet lives. But the moment they become active opponents of the Empire, the political calculation changes. They're no longer innocent children to be pitied. They're rebels to be crushed. The Emperor would have justification to move against them. The question is how and when he'd make that move. A direct assassination would still be politically costly, but may be worth it if they're actively damaging the Empire. Kidnapping them and rescuing them from Organa's influence could work, claiming that Bail has been radicalizing them against their father, turning them, corrupting them to the dark side like Anakin, would be ideal but difficult given their upbringing and their knowledge of what their father became. Vader's role in all of this would be increasingly complex. He'd have watched his children grow up through holonet reports and Imperial surveillance. He'd know their personalities, their strengths, their weaknesses. He'd have formed opinions about them despite never meeting them. And he'd be conflicted in ways that erode his commitment to the dark side. Part of Vader would want to claim them, to reveal himself as their father and bring them into his world. They're powerful in the Force. They're his blood. They could be his family, his legacy. But another part of him would recoil from this idea. He's a monster. He knows it. What could he possibly offer them except corruption and pain? They're better off hating him from a distance than loving him up close, and Palpatine would manipulate these feelings constantly, sometimes encouraging Vader to think of the twins as potential apprentices, as tools to be used, sometimes reminding him that they're Organa's children now, that they'd never accept him, that trying to connect with them is pointless. The Emperor would use Luke and Leia as emotional weapons against Vader, keeping him off balance and controllable. But eventually, inevitably, there would have to be a direct encounter. You can't have Darth Vader and his children in the same galaxy, both of them public figures, both of them involved in galactic events, without them eventually coming face to face. The question is when and how and under what circumstances. Maybe it happens during an Imperial crackdown on Alderaan, Vader arrives personally to oversee the suppression of rebel activity, and suddenly he's on the same planet as his children. Palace security would go into overdrive. Bail would consider evacuating Luke and Leia. But where could they go that's safer than Alderaan with its planetary shields and defenses? The twins would insist on staying, on not running from their father. They'd want to confront him. The meeting could be semi-public, in the palace throne room with guards and witnesses present, or it could be orchestrated as a private encounter. Either way, it would be one of the most emotionally charged moments in Star Wars history. Vader, seeing the children he thought were dead, now grown into young adults. Luke and Leia, facing the monster who wears their father's name. What do any of them say? Vader might speak first, his mechanical voice filling the silence. He might acknowledge who they are, might tell them he's watched them grow, might even express something approximating pride. Or he might be cold, treating them as enemies, as rebels, as problems to be solved. His approach would depend on his mental state in that moment, on how much of Anakin is still fighting inside the armor. Luke, passionate and confrontational, might challenge Vader directly. He might demand to know how Anakin Skywalker, the hero, became this. He might accuse him of betraying everything he once stood for. Or he might try to reach the good Bail has always insisted is still in there somewhere. Might call him father and ask him to come back to the light. Leia, more controlled and political, might approach it differently. She might speak to him as one political figure to another, might try to negotiate, might use words as precisely as a diplomat would. Vader's response would be crucial. If he lashes out, if he tries to hurt them or capture them, it confirms everything they've been told about him being irredeemable. If he hesitates, if he shows any weakness or conflict, it plants seeds that maybe, just maybe, Anakin Skywalker isn't entirely dead. The encounter would end without resolution, but it would change all three of them. For Vader, meeting his children would make them real in a way surveillance footage never could. He'd see Padme in Leia's face, see himself in Luke's passion. He'd be reminded of everything he lost, everything he destroyed. The encounter would haunt him, would make the dark side harder to embrace fully. Palpatine would sense this weakness and would work to eliminate it, possibly by ordering Vader to kill the twins to prove his loyalty. For Luke and Leia, meeting Vader would force them to confront the reality of their father rather than the abstract concept. They'd see that there's a man inside the armor, damaged and broken, but still there. They'd understand that saving him, if it's even possible, would be infinitely harder than they imagined. But they might also feel that it's necessary, that their father's redemption is somehow key to defeating the Empire. This is where the public nature of their existence creates interesting complications. Their meeting with Vader, even if private, would be speculated about endlessly on the holonet. Did Vader try to kill them? Did he try to recruit them? Did they try to redeem him? Public opinion would split based on what people want to believe. The rebellion might use the encounter in propaganda, framing it as Vader confronting the innocence and goodness he destroyed. The Empire might spin it as ungrateful children rejecting their father's attempts at reconciliation. The political ramifications would ripple outward. Systems on the fence about supporting the rebellion might be swayed by the image of Vader's own children opposing him. Imperial loyalists might become more entrenched, seeing the twins as traitors to their bloodline. The galactic conversation about the Empire, about Vader, about the nature of good and evil, would intensify around these very public figures. As the rebellion grows and the galactic civil war intensifies, Luke and Leia would have to decide what role they'll play. They're in their late teens or early 20s now, fully capable of fighting. Their force abilities, if properly trained, would make them formidable. Their political skills, learned from Bail and Breha, would make them valuable in diplomatic contexts. Their symbolic value is undeniable, but every role they take makes them bigger targets. Bail would want them to stay on Alderaan, to be symbols without being soldiers. But Luke and Leia wouldn't accept that. They've grown up watching the Empire's atrocities. They've seen beings suffer under tyranny. They can't stand by while others fight. Leia might join the rebellion's political wing, becoming a voice for freedom and democracy in contexts where she can reach billions. Luke might want more direct action, might insist on joining military operations despite the enormous risk. The rebellion's leadership would be divided on how to use them. Mon Mothma might see them primarily as political assets, too valuable to risk in combat. Military leaders like Admiral Akbar might see them as force-sensitive warriors who could turn the tide of battles. Some might argue they should be kept in reserve, saved for the final confront. And through all of this, Palpatine would be planning. He'd have spent years studying them, understanding their psychology, finding their weaknesses. He'd know that Luke is passionate and impulsive, that Leia is controlled but fiercely protective. He'd know how to manipulate them, how to trap them, how to potentially turn them. His ultimate goal might be to corrupt them as he corrupted their father, to complete the tragic cycle by making all three Skywalkers serve the dark side. The scenario that would terrify Bail the most would be Palpatine successfully capturing one or both twins and offering Vader a choice: serve me absolutely, or watch your children die. It's the same leverage he used with Anakin and Padme, but now applied to the next generation. Would Vader choose his children or his master? Would the twins sacrifice themselves rather than give Palpatine that leverage? The ethical dilemmas would be agonizing, but there's also the possibility that their public nature protects them even in capture. If Palpatine kidnaps them, the galaxy knows about it immediately. Public outrage would be enormous. Systems might openly rebel in response. The Emperor would have to either kill them quickly or try to corrupt them publicly, turning their symbolic value to his advantage. Neither option is clean or easy. Luke and Leia's relationship with the Force would be central to how this all plays out. If they've been properly trained, if they've developed their abilities, they'd be powerful by their late teens. Not Jedi Knights perhaps, but formidable Force users capable of defending themselves and others. Their fighting style might be different from traditional Jedi, influenced by their unique upbringing and training. They'd use the Force for protection and justice, but they'd also understand politics and propaganda in ways most Jedi never did. Their relationship with lightsabers would be interesting. In canon, Luke builds his own lightsaber and Leia never really uses one. But in this timeline, if they've been trained in combat, they might both carry lightsabers. Bail might have recovered fallen Jedi's weapons and given them to the twins. Imagine the symbolism of Darth Vader's children wielding lightsabers openly, standing for the values their father abandoned. It would be powerful imagery that the rebellion would absolutely use. The question of whether they could redeem Vader would become central to the endgame. In canon, Luke alone believes in his father's potential for good and ultimately proves correct. But in this timeline, both Luke and Leia have grown up knowing about Vader, thinking about him, debating whether he can be saved. They might both believe in his redemption, or they might disagree. Leia might see him as irredeemable while Luke holds on to hope, creating tension between the twins for the first time in their lives. The final confrontation would need to be different from the canonical Death Star throne room scene. It couldn't be Luke alone facing the Emperor and Vader. The public nature of the twins means any final battle would have witnesses, would be recorded, would become history. Maybe it happens during a massive battle where the entire galaxy is watching through holonet feeds. Maybe it's a public execution that goes wrong when Luke and Leia fight back. Maybe it's an invasion of Alderaan where Vader and the Emperor come to eliminate the rebel sympathizers once and for all. However it happens, the moment when Vader has to choose between his master and his children would be witnessed by millions or billions. His redemption, if it happens, wouldn't be a private moment between father and son. It would be a public act that the entire galaxy sees. Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, turning against Palpatine to save Luke and Leia Skywalker. The symbolic impact would be staggering. If Vader survives his redemption, if he doesn't die in the act of saving his children, the aftermath would be complicated beyond measure. He's responsible for countless atrocities. His crimes are public and well documented. The galaxy has watched him enforce imperial tyranny for years. Does he face trial? Does he go into hiding? Do Luke and Leia protect him, arguing for mercy and rehabilitation? The political and ethical questions would be enormous. But there's also the darker possibility that Vader doesn't turn, that the public pressure and Palpatine's manipulation are too strong. Maybe he captures his children and brings them before the Emperor. Maybe he watches as Palpatine tortures them, trying to corrupt them. Maybe he participates, believing that joining the dark side is their only path to survival. In this scenario, Luke and Leia would have to escape on their own, would have to accept that their father is truly lost, would have to kill him if necessary to stop the Empire. The impact on the rebellion would be profound either way. If Vader redeems himself and helps destroy the Emperor, the rebellion gains an enormous symbolic victory. The idea that even the worst monsters can turn back to the light would inspire beings across the galaxy. But if Vader remains evil, if he sides with Palpatine against his own children, it proves that some people are beyond redemption. That evil must simply be defeated rather than converted. Alderaan's fate would be a critical question mark in this timeline. In canon, the Death Star destroys Alderaan to punish Leia and demonstrate the station's power. But in this timeline, Alderaan is Luke and Leia's home, the planet that sheltered and raised them publicly. Would Palpatine still destroy it? The political ramifications would be even more severe than in canon. He'd be destroying the homeworld of Anakin Skywalker's children the galaxy has watched grow up. The backlash could be empire-shattering, or maybe Palpatine uses the threat of destroying Alderaan as leverage. Surrender, serve the dark side, or watch your home and everyone you love die. It would be the ultimate test of Luke and Leia's commitment to the rebellion and to doing what's right even when the cost is unbearable. Their choice would define them and would determine the course of the war. The role of other characters would shift in interesting ways. Han Solo, if he appears in this timeline, might be hired to protect or kidnap Luke and Leia at various points. His relationship with them would be different if they're not naive farm boy and secret princess, but public figures he's seen on the holonet his whole life. Chewbacca might have opinions about the Skywalker twins based on his experience during the Clone Wars. Lando Calrissian might try to use his connection to them for business or political advantage. The droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO, present an interesting question. In canon, they serve Padme during the Clone Wars, then come into Bail's possession and eventually Leia's. In this timeline, Bail might give them to Luke and Leia as children, as gifts from their mother and reminders of their heritage. The twins would grow up with these droids, might learn about their parents through stories R2 could show them. The emotional connection would be deeper and different from the canonical relationship. Obi-Wan's role would be complicated. He can't reveal himself publicly without putting Luke and Leia at even greater risk, but he might visit them secretly, might send them messages through secure channels, might guide them from the shadows. His guilt over Anakin's fall would be compounded by watching Anakin's children grow up famous and endangered. He'd want to protect them, but would be limited in what he could do without exposing them to even more danger. Yoda's perspective from Dagobah would be interesting. He'd be watching through the Force, seeing how Luke and Leia develop, wondering if he made the right choice allowing Bail to raise them publicly. He might reach out to them through the Force, might appear in their dreams or meditations, might guide them without revealing himself. Or he might stay completely hidden, believing that the old Jedi way failed, and these children need to find their own path without interference from the past. The question of marriage and relationships for Luke and Leia would be uniquely complicated. In canon, they each eventually find partners and have children, but in this timeline, they're the most famous young people in the galaxy. Every relationship they have would be scrutinized, analyzed, potentially used against them. Would anyone want to date Darth Vader's children knowing the danger and attention it would bring? Would Luke and Leia even try to have normal relationships? Or would they accept that their lives are too public, too political, too dangerous for that kind of normalcy? Every person who shows interest in Luke or Leia would be investigated thoroughly by Bail's security forces. Are they genuine or are they Imperial spies? Are they attracted to the person or the fame? Are they brave enough to handle the death threats that would inevitably come? The logistics of dating when you're the most watched teenagers in the galaxy would be nightmarish. Every dinner, every conversation, every moment of affection would be captured by cameras and analyzed by billions. Luke might rebel against this, might insist on having normal relationships despite the complications. He could fall for someone unexpected, maybe a pilot in the rebellion, or a citizen of Alderaan who sees him as just Luke, rather than as a symbol. But that relationship would be tested immediately by public pressure, by security concerns, by the reality that anyone close to Luke becomes a target for his enemies. The Empire might try to kidnap or kill his partner to hurt him. Rebel extremists might attack them for being a distraction from the cause. The relationship would have to be extraordinarily strong to survive this pressure. Leia, more pragmatic and politically minded, might approach relationships as strategic alliances. She'd understand that whoever she chooses to be with becomes a political statement. If she dates someone from a prominent rebel family, it strengthens those alliances. If she dates someone from a neutral world, it might bring that world closer to the rebellion. Every choice has implications beyond personal happiness. This would make genuine romance incredibly difficult for her. How do you separate real feelings from political calculation when everything you do matters to billions of beings? The possibility of arranged marriages would definitely be discussed. Bail and other rebel leaders might suggest strategic marriages that would strengthen alliances or bring crucial systems into the rebellion. Leia might even consider this pragmatically, seeing it as another way to serve the cause. But Luke would rebel violently against the idea, seeing it as exactly the kind of manipulation that the Empire practices. The tension between duty and personal freedom would create conflicts between the twins and their adoptive father. There's also the question of whether Luke and Leia should have children of their own. Their bloodline is powerful in the Force, potentially dangerously so. Bringing another generation of Skywalkers into a galaxy at war could be seen as irresponsible or as necessary for the future. Bail might discourage them from having children until after the Empire is defeated, arguing that it's too dangerous, that any child of theirs would be hunted even more aggressively than they are. But the twins might want families precisely because their own family was torn apart. Might want to prove that the Skywalker legacy can be about love and creation rather than just destruction. The Empire's propaganda machine would work overtime trying to control the narrative around Luke and Leia. Imperial Holonet channels would run stories about how the twins are ungrateful, how they've been brainwashed by rebel extremists, how they're betraying their father's memory. They might fabricate scandals, create fake footage of the twins saying or doing terrible things, plant stories about them being spoiled or cruel or cowardly. The information war would be constant and brutal. Bail would need his own propaganda operation to counter this. He'd hire the best media specialists, the most talented holographers, the most persuasive speechwriters. Every public appearance by Luke and Leia would be carefully choreographed to present them in the best light. Their speeches would be focus tested. Their wardrobe would be chosen for symbolic impact. They'd essentially be political candidates from birth, always campaigning, always performing, never able to just be themselves. The psychological toll of this would be immense. Luke and Leia would grow up never knowing privacy, never able to make mistakes without the entire galaxy judging them, never able to just be kids or teenagers or young adults. They'd develop coping mechanisms, ways to maintain a core self separate from their public persona. But the line between who they really are and who they pretend to be would blur over time. They might lose track of their authentic selves under the layers of performance and symbolism. This could lead to identity crises as they mature. Luke might have moments where he doesn't know if he genuinely believes in the rebellion or if he's just playing the role everyone expects. Leia might question whether her political convictions are truly hers, or if she's just mimicking what she thinks her mother would have done. The existential questions that most people grapple with in private would be complicated for them by the public nature of their existence. Mental health support would be crucial but difficult. Who could they talk to about their struggles? A therapist would need to be extraordinarily trustworthy and discreet. The twins might only feel comfortable talking to each other, creating a closed loop where they reinforce each other's issues rather than getting outside perspective. Or they might find mentors within the rebellion, older fighters who understand the weight of being symbols and can offer guidance. Bail himself would struggle with guilt over the choice he made. Late at night, when the public events are over and the cameras are off, he'd wonder if he did the right thing. He'd see the strain on Luke and Leia, the way they've been forced to grow up too fast, the way they can never be normal. He'd question whether protecting them through publicity was worth the cost to their childhood, their innocence, their chance at happiness. But he'd also see the good they've done, the hope they've inspired, and he'd try to convince himself the sacrifice was necessary. Organa would be the emotional anchor for the family. While Bail handles the political and strategic aspects, Breha would focus on making sure Luke and Leia have moments of normalcy, of joy, of childhood wonder, despite everything. She'd organize private family dinners where politics isn't discussed. She'd create traditions and rituals that are just for them, not for public consumption. She'd be the one who holds them when they cry, who listens without judgment, who reminds them that they're loved for who they are, not for what they represent. The relationship between Luke, Leia, and Bail would be complex. They'd love him as their father, but they'd also resent him for the choices he made that shaped their lives. They'd be grateful for his protection and guidance, but they'd chafe against his control. As they grow older and more independent, they'd clash with him over strategy, over how visible they should be, over what risks they're willing to take. These would be normal parent-child conflicts amplified to galactic proportions because every family argument has political implications. The role of the Alderaanian government and people in protecting the twins would be significant. The entire planet would essentially be invested in Luke and Leia's safety and success. Citizens would see them as Alderaan's children, symbols of their world's commitment to peace and justice. This would create genuine affection, but also enormous pressure. Luke and Leia would feel responsible to Alderaan in a way that most children don't feel responsible to their homeworld. They'd know that their actions reflect on billions of Alderaanians who've sheltered them. This makes the potential destruction of Alderaan even more devastating in this timeline. If the Death Star does target Alderaan, it's not just destroying Leia's homeworld as in canon. It's destroying Luke's home too. It's killing Bail and Breha, who raised them. It's murdering billions of beings who protected them throughout their childhood. The trauma would be unimaginable and would fundamentally change both twins. The guilt they'd feel, knowing that Alderaan was likely targeted because of them, would be crushing, but it would also galvanize them. The destruction of Alderaan would eliminate any remaining reluctance they had about fighting the Empire directly. It would personalize the war in a way that even their father's fall didn't. Palpatine would have made a catastrophic strategic error, turning his greatest potential propaganda weapons into his most committed and effective enemies. Luke and Leia, fueled by grief and rage, would become the faces of the rebellion's vengeance. The question of Force abilities and lightsaber combat becomes more prominent in the second half of their story. By their late teens, if they've been training consistently, Luke and Leia would be formidable Force users, not as skilled as Jedi Knights who trained from early childhood in the Temple, but far more capable than untrained Force sensitives. They'd have developed their own style, influenced by whatever teachers they had access to and by their unique situation. Luke's fighting style might be aggressive and passionate, channeling his emotions into his combat the way his father did. He'd favor bold attacks, taking risks, using his instincts and the Force to guide him through dangerous situations. His lightsaber form might be a modified version of Form 5, Djem So, the same style Anakin used, though Luke wouldn't know this consciously. He'd simply be drawn to techniques that feel natural to his Skywalker reflexes and temperament. Leia's approach would be more calculated and defensive. She'd study combat the way she studies politics, understanding the theory and strategy before executing. Her lightsaber work might be based on Form 3, Soresu, focusing on defense and waiting for opponents to make mistakes. She'd use the Force for enhancement and awareness rather than direct attacks, preferring to outthink her enemies rather than overpower them. In many ways, her style would resemble Obi-Wan's, though again this would be convergent evolution rather than direct teaching. Together, they'd be a devastating team. Luke provides the offense, Leia provides the defense and strategy. They'd have a Force bond as siblings that allows them to coordinate without speaking, to sense each other's intentions, to cover each other's weaknesses. In battle, they'd move like dancers, perfectly synchronized, making up for their individual shortcomings through perfect partnership. Any enemy facing both of them would be in serious trouble. The symbolism of them wielding lightsabers openly cannot be overstated. The Empire claims the Jedi are extinct, that the Force was a myth or at best a lost art. But here are two young people, famous across the galaxy, demonstrating Jedi abilities for everyone to see. Every duel they fight, every Force power they display, every lightsaber ignited in defense of justice contradicts Imperial propaganda. They'd be living proof that the Force is real, that its traditions survive, that the Empire's lies about the Jedi are exactly that, lies. The question of where their lightsabers come from would be important. The colors of their blades would be symbolic. Luke might have a blue blade like his father's original lightsaber, representing justice and protection. Or he might have green, representing growth and renewal, symbolizing his commitment to being better than Vader. Leia might have purple, a rare color that represents balance between light and dark, appropriate for someone who must navigate both politics and combat. Or she might have yellow, traditionally associated with Jedi Sentinels, who blended combat skills with scholarly pursuits. As they approach their early 20s, the timeline would accelerate toward the major confrontations that define the original trilogy. The Death Star would be operational or near operational. The rebellion would be planning desperate strikes against Imperial targets, and Luke and Leia would be at the center of it all. No longer children to be protected, but warriors and leaders in their own right. The theft of the Death Star plans would play out differently with public Luke and Leia. In canon, Leia is captured trying to smuggle the plans, leading to her rescue by Luke and Han. But in this timeline, both twins would likely be involved in the operation from the start. They might lead the team that steals the plans, using their Force abilities to infiltrate Imperial facilities. Or they might be the obvious targets that distract Imperial attention while others do the actual stealing. The Imperial response to any rebel operation involving Luke and Leia would be overwhelming. Vader would take personal command. He'd deploy massive resources to capture them, seeing this as his chance to finally meet his children properly, to claim them or kill them or corrupt them. The chase would be galactic in scope, with the fate of the rebellion hanging on whether the twins can deliver the Death Star plans while evading their father. Imagine the tension of Vader hunting his own children, knowing who they are, knowing they're running from him. Every near miss would be agony. Part of him wants to catch them, to finally speak to them face to face. Part of him wants them to escape because he can't bear the thought of what Palpatine would do to them if they were captured. The internal conflict would tear him apart, making him less effective as a hunter than he should be, which Palpatine would notice and exploit. When Vader finally does corner them, when there's no escape and they're forced to fight, it would be the most emotionally charged lightsaber duel in Star Wars history. Father versus children. Vader's superior skill and experience versus Luke and Leia's youth and determination. The Force would be churning with emotion, light and dark clashing not just in physical combat but in spiritual warfare. Vader would be trying to prove he's dominant, trying to show them they should fear and respect him. Luke and Leia would be fighting for their lives, but also trying to reach Anakin, trying to prove there's still good in him. The duel might end with Vader having them at his mercy, lightsaber raised to strike and then hesitating. He'd see their faces, so young, so determined, so much like Padme and himself. He'd feel the Force bond between them, the love they have for each other, the kind of connection he destroyed when he fell to the dark side. And he wouldn't be able to do it. He'd lower his blade and let them escape, telling himself it's strategy, that capturing them later serves Palpatine better, but knowing deep down that he simply cannot kill his own children. This moment would be witnessed and recorded. Holonet footage of Darth Vader sparing the Skywalker twins would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. People would speculate endlessly about why. Some would see it as proof that there's still good in Vader. Others would see it as a cruel game, Vader toying with his prey. The Empire would scramble to control the narrative, claiming Vader was ordered not to kill them because the Emperor wants them alive for some purpose. But the truth would be obvious to anyone watching closely. Vader couldn't bring himself to harm his children. Palpatine would be furious but also calculating. Vader's weakness is confirmed and must be addressed. But it's also an opportunity. If Vader can't kill the twins, perhaps he can be manipulated into bringing them to the Emperor willingly. Palpatine could promise to spare them if Vader delivers them, could dangle the possibility of a Sith family ruling the galaxy together. Vader might believe this, might convince himself that bringing Luke and Leia to Palpatine is protecting them from worse fates. The Emperor is a master of turning weaknesses into traps. The rebellion would have to deal with the aftermath of footage showing Vader sparing the twins. Some would celebrate it as a moral victory, proof that even the Empire's greatest enforcer has limits. Others would worry that it makes Luke and Leia look weak, like they survived because Vader pitied them rather than because they're strong. The twins themselves would have complicated feelings. Gratitude that they're alive, but also shame that they needed mercy from the monster they're supposed to defeat. Luke might see it as confirmation that Vader can be saved. Leia might see it as proof that he's playing psychological games, making them doubt themselves. The question of whether to use this incident in propaganda would divide the rebellion. Should they broadcast footage of Vader's hesitation, turning it into a recruitment tool showing that even Darth Vader believes the rebellion represents something worth preserving? Or would that humanize Vader too much, make people forget his crimes, potentially weaken the moral clarity of the rebel cause? Bail would have strong opinions, but ultimately Luke and Leia would decide whether to make this public. They're the ones who were there, the ones who looked into Vader's mask and felt his conflict. As the war intensifies and the Death Star becomes operational, the question of whether to involve Luke and Leia in the attack becomes critical. They're skilled pilots in this timeline, having trained extensively because they knew they'd need every advantage. They're powerful Force users who could sense danger and navigate challenges that would destroy normal pilots. They're symbols whose presence would inspire every rebel fighter in the battle. But they're also targets. Vader would be at the Death Star. Palpatine might be there too. Sending the twins into that battle could win the war or lose it catastrophically. The tactical debate would be intense. Military commanders would argue that Luke and Leia's Force abilities make them the best pilots for the critical trench run. Their reflexes and precognition would give them the best chance of making the impossible shot. But political leaders would argue that losing them would destroy the rebellion's morale and eliminate its most powerful symbols. Bail would be torn, wanting to protect his children but also knowing they're the rebellion's best hope. Luke and Leia would insist on participating. They've watched beings die for the rebellion while they stayed safe behind security details. They've seen worlds suffer under Imperial tyranny. They've lost friends and mentors to Vader and the Emperor. When the moment comes to strike the blow that could end the Death Star, they're not going to sit it out. They'd volunteer for the assault, potentially threatening to steal ships and join anyway if they're not officially included. The Battle of Yavin would be transformed by their presence. Vader, leading TIE fighters against the rebel attack, would sense them immediately. The Force would scream at him that his children are here, in danger, about to die if he doesn't protect them. But they're also trying to destroy the Death Star, trying to kill potentially millions of Imperials, including himself. The conflict would be paralyzing. Does he shoot them down to save the Death Star? Does he protect them and let the station be destroyed? Does he try to disable their ships without killing them and risk failing at both objectives? The other rebel pilots would know they're flying with the Skywalker twins. Some would feel honored, inspired, fighting harder because Luke and Leia are trusting them with their lives. Others would feel the pressure of protecting the most important people in the rebellion, potentially making mistakes because they're too focused on keeping the twins safe. The squadron dynamics would be complicated by their presence. In the actual trench run, if Luke is the one taking the shot as in canon, he'd have Leia somewhere nearby, maybe flying cover or maybe in his ship as co-pilot. The moment when he has to turn off his targeting computer and trust the Force would be even more significant, because Leia would feel it through their bond. She'd sense his decision, would add her own Force strength to his, creating a resonance that makes the impossible shot not just possible, but inevitable. The Force itself would be guiding their combined will, making them a conduit for destiny. Vader pursuing them down the trench would be the most agonizing experience of his life. He's seconds away from shooting down his own children. His targeting computer has them locked. His finger is on the trigger, and he can't do it. In canon, he hesitates before Han saves Luke. In this timeline, with both twins there, he might actively sabotage his own shot, might deliberately miss when he should have had them. Other TIE pilots might notice, might report back to the Emperor that Vader refused to kill the rebel pilots he had dead to rights. The aftermath of the Death Star's destruction would see Luke and Leia as even bigger celebrities than before. They'd be war heroes, the pilots who destroyed the Empire's terror weapon. The galaxy would celebrate them, would tell stories about them, would make them into legends. But they'd also be hunted even more aggressively. Every Imperial asset would be searching for them. Every bounty hunter in the galaxy would be after the massive reward Palpatine would place on their heads. The Empire's propaganda would go into overdrive trying to discredit them. They'd claim the Death Star was destroyed by sabotage, not by the rebels. They'd say Luke and Leia are terrorists who killed millions of Imperial citizens and soldiers who were just doing their jobs. They'd paint the twins as spoiled children playing at war while real people die. The information warfare would be vicious, trying to turn public opinion against the rebellion's greatest symbols. But it wouldn't work as well as Palpatine hopes. Too many beings saw the Death Star's destruction as liberation. Too many worlds were next on the targeting list and were saved when the station exploded. Luke and Leia would be heroes to billions despite Imperial propaganda. Their fame would only grow, making them even more powerful as symbols but also even bigger targets. The search for other Jedi or Force users would become more urgent. Luke and Leia know they need better training if they're going to face Vader and the Emperor successfully. They'd seek out Force-sensitive beings, lost Jedi who survived Order 66, ancient temples with holocrons of knowledge. This quest would take them to places like Dagobah where Yoda hides, or Tatooine where Obi-Wan watches over what he thinks is an empty homestead, or Ahch-To, where Luke's island would eventually be. Finding Yoda would be a pivotal moment. The ancient Grandmaster would sense them coming, would debate whether to reveal himself. When they arrive and discover him, when they ask for training, Yoda would be forced to confront his guilt over how the Jedi fell and his uncertainty about what they should become. He'd test them rigorously, pushing them to their limits, trying to determine if they have the discipline and wisdom to use their power responsibly. Yoda's training would be brutal and illuminating. He'd teach them not just combat and force techniques, but philosophy and history. He'd explain how the old Jedi Order failed, how their rigidity and arrogance made them vulnerable to Sith manipulation. He'd warn them against making the same mistakes, against thinking power alone is enough to defeat evil. He'd emphasize that being a Jedi isn't about combat prowess, but about serving others and trusting the Force. Luke would struggle with Yoda's lessons. He's passionate and wants action, wants to confront Vader and the Emperor immediately. Yoda would tell him he's not ready, that rushing into battle with incomplete training is how his father fell. The tension between them would mirror the canonical Luke-Yoda dynamic, but amplified because public Luke has even more confidence and less patience than farm boy Luke. Leia would take to Yoda's teaching more readily. Her political mind understands the value of patience and strategy. She'd absorb his lessons about seeing the bigger picture, about understanding that wars are won not just on battlefields but in hearts and minds. Yoda might even tell her she's more suited to be a Jedi than Luke, which would create interesting sibling rivalry dynamics. But ultimately, both would learn what they need to. They'd grow in power and wisdom under Yoda's guidance, and when the time comes for them to leave, when they sense their friends are in danger, or when Vader moves against the rebellion, Yoda would let them go with warnings and blessings. He'd know they're not fully ready, but he'd also understand that readiness isn't just about training. Sometimes you have to face your trials to truly become who you're meant to be. The confrontation with Vader would have to happen eventually. All the avoiding, all the near misses, all the times they escaped would lead inevitably to a moment where there's no running, where they stand face to face with their father and decide once and for all whether he can be saved or must be destroyed. This confrontation would be even more public and dramatic than the canonical throne room scene because Luke and Leia's entire lives have been public. It might happen on a holonet broadcast that billions watch in real time. It might happen during a major battle where the fate of the rebellion hangs in balance. It might happen in a place symbolically important, like Naboo where Anakin and Padme fell in love, or Mustafar where Anakin became Vader. Wherever it happens, it would be the moment that defines all of them. Vader would have been building to this too. Every encounter with his children, every time he failed to kill them, every time he felt the pull back toward the light has been leading here. Palpatine would be pushing him to finally eliminate them, to prove his loyalty by destroying the last remnants of Anakin Skywalker. But Vader would be tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of serving a master he knows manipulated him from the beginning. The duel would be fierce and emotional. Luke would fight with passion, channeling his anger at what Vader's done. Leia would fight with precision, using strategy to overcome Vader's superior experience. Together they'd push him harder than he's been pushed since his duel with Obi-Wan. And throughout the fight they'd be talking to him, calling him Anakin, reminding him of who he was, begging him to come back. And maybe, just maybe, it works. Maybe the combined love of both his children is what Anakin needs to break free. Maybe having both Luke and Leia there, working together, believing in him together, gives him strength that Luke alone couldn't provide in the canonical timeline. Maybe he turns on Palpatine earlier. Maybe he survives his redemption. Maybe he gets to actually be a father to Luke and Leia instead of dying moments after saving them. Or maybe it doesn't work. Maybe the darkness is too deep. Maybe Palpatine's manipulation is too complete. Maybe Anakin is truly dead and all that remains is Vader. In that case, Luke and Leia would have to make the terrible choice to kill their father, to end him not out of hatred but out of necessity to stop him from hurting more people. That would be a different kind of tragedy. One where love isn't enough and sometimes evil must simply be destroyed. Either way, the moment would reshape the galaxy. The Skywalker family's story, which began with Anakin's fall, would find its conclusion in his children's courage. Whether Vader is redeemed or destroyed, whether he dies or survives to face justice, the outcome would be broadcast across every system. The galaxy would watch the final chapter of Anakin Skywalker's story play out in real time, and in the aftermath, Luke and Leia would have to decide what comes next. If they've defeated Vader and Palpatine, if the Empire is broken, what kind of galaxy do they want to build? They've spent their entire lives as symbols, as public figures, as children of prophecy and politics. Can they finally just be themselves? Or has their role as symbols become so fundamental to who they are that they can't separate from it? The new republic that forms would be shaped by their influence. They'd push for systems of government that prevent another Palpatine from rising, that protect individual rights while maintaining order, that value transparency and accountability. Leia would likely take a leadership role, using her political skills to build the peace they fought for. Luke might focus on rebuilding the Jedi, creating a new order that learns from the old one's mistakes while preserving its values. But they'd do it together, as they've done everything. The twins who were made public from birth, who grew up under the galaxy's gaze, who fought impossible odds and survived. Luke and Leia Skywalker, symbols who became heroes, children who transcended their father's darkness, beings who proved that transparency and courage can be just as powerful as any weapon. That's the legacy of Bail Organa's gamble. That's what happens when you raise Anakin's children publicly. You create not just warriors or politicians or Jedi, but symbols of hope that can never be extinguished because the entire galaxy is watching them shine.